hundreds of hours of investigation was spent on the narrative that said that this guy murdered this other person. That narrative came from the powers to be.
There's a Compton police officer by the name of Tim Brennan who is a protege of Reggie Wright Sr. Well, Tim Brennan is the first one that comes up in this investigation with the entire concept that a gang was involved and that Orlando Anderson was actually the shooter. Tim Brennan and Bobby Ladd run around talking about what great guys Reggie Wright Sr. and Horry Taylor were. And of course, this is the same Reggie Wright Sr. that the Compton Police Department says is in charge of both the gangs and drugs are disappearing from the evidence locker. And the same Horry Taylor, that's the one that has 2 keys of cocaine fall out of his locker when they investigate him after being suspended.
Known and unknown to the grand jury to unlawfully, knowingly, and intentionally possess with the intent to distribute and to distribute hydrocodone, a Schedule II controlled substance as classified by the United States Code, Title 21. Count 3. Beginning at a time unknown to the grand jury, but at least in about March of 2013 and continuing on to May of 2017, in the Western District of Tennessee and elsewhere, the defendants did unlawfully, knowingly, and intentionally conspire, combine, confederate, and agree together with other persons, both known and unknown to the grand jury, to unlawfully, knowingly, and intentionally possess with the intent to distribute and distribute oxycodone, aka Oxycontin, a Schedule II controlled substance as classified by Title 21 of the United States Code. Count 4. On or about May 5th of 2017, in the Western District of Tennessee, the defendants, Reginald Wright Jr., a.k.a. Reg, a.k.a. Unk, and Montrell Ray Bernard, a.k.a. Ray, and a.k.a. Big Ray, being aided and abetted by the other, did unlawfully, knowingly, and intentionally possess with the intent to distribute and to distribute a mixture and substance containing a detectable amount of marijuana, controlled substance by the United States Code. Count 5. On or about January 25th, 2017, in the Western District of Tennessee, the defendants, Reginald Wright Jr. and O.B. Hildson, being aided and abetted by the other, did unlawfully, knowingly, and intentionally possess with the intent to distribute a mixture substance containing a detectable amount of marijuana, controlled one substance in violation of Title 21 United States Code, referring to one Reginald Wright and several others that are involved with it. Count 10.
I did work undercover for the FBI and ATF during my tenure with Death Row Records and Right Way Protective Services.
A CEO of a company or the wife of somebody being murdered is one kind of investigation, but now you're talking about something where there was all kinds of alleged baggage involved. And again, that first night, I don't think he was totally forthcoming on everything he knew.
Every time I think it's over, they drag me right back in again.
We were supposed to went down to Vegas, me, you, and Malcolm, because Malcolm can ID the person. We were supposed to send you and him down to ID, to see if we look at the pictures, because they had a suspect, and that's when they had Orlando as a suspect, and then they were going to just have y'all look at the pictures before then, just to see if maybe that, made your memory get better or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you can describe somebody, but once you see a picture, oh yeah, that's him. And so that's what they were going to have you to do. And that's what David told them, that we got 2 witnesses that's, maybe can help you out and put some things in the light. And plus the statement that you gave about the chain and all of that, with the additional information.
Hundreds of hours of investigation was spent on the narrative that said that this guy murdered this other person. That narrative came from the powers to be.
So obviously from a law enforcement agency looking into this, all of a sudden there's war in Compton. Basic calls are made, so quote unquote, alleged Crip members, whatever, were killed left and right. But from Las Vegas standpoint, the whole thing smells.
Tim Brennan uses a couple of confidential informants, and we have no idea of their reliability.
Oh yeah, people, embellish in search warrants to get it, so they can get it. It's not, in my experience, it wasn't something that was widely done, but there were times that you'd hear about it was done, and they had to get a search warrant, and they couldn't come up with, the probable cause for it, so sometimes it was embellished or, made up.
That's what Tim Brennan told me personally. He said whenever they're ready, tell them that when they're ready to know who did it, who was in the car, and all that stuff, tell them we have the evidence, we know who did it, we know exactly who was in that car that night. And he's basically saying, and I don't want to start dissension between two different departments, but he said
well, it's funny because everything we had came from Tim Brennan.
You can't always take what they say 100% true, because you always have to look at a motive for somebody of why are they saying why are they telling me what they tell me? Do they have a motive? Maybe they don't like him, or they don't like the individual, or they got something against the individual, or somebody told them, I need you to pin this.
Are you from the South?
Cops do it all the time.
That was intentionally added to the search warrant to give it a flavor of contradiction and to identify the South with the Southside Crips.
When a judge signs a search warrant, that judge is absolutely relying upon the representations made in the affidavit. And the affidavit has to be under oath. The judge is relying upon the veracity and truthfulness of that police officer.
The statements made by Tim Brennan were not simply academic. They were actually made for an intended purpose and for a reason that judge would have to buy later.
And there are times, and I was a judge myself, where you get the call at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning from the drug enforcement officers that they want to come to your house and they have you sign a search warrant.
It's like when we served the search warrant on my undercover operation, the affidavit was this thick.
The affidavit says that somebody got out of the car and started talking shit. Well, that didn't happen. No witness ever said that happened. And if you really go back to think about the amount of work that would have involved, it asks a whole lot more questions.
And you got to make darn sure as a judge that you're attentive, you're attuned to what they're doing, and you have some clarity.
Well, if all your facts are based upon the opinion or assumptions of other individuals and you have no confirmation of that by other witnesses, then you're going to go back and you're going to put your affidavit together and you say, I am swearing to these truths that were given to me. And these truths may not be truth. They're only opinions and assumptions.
For example, if someone got out of the passenger side of a stopped car and walked all the way around the front of that car or around the back of that car, talking shit and holding a gun, that the bodyguards would have reacted to that. But it didn't happen.
So the detective that is getting the information must be able to confirm or to have other evidentiary value to verify them as truths.
In my era, if I was caught lying, it would have been the end of my career. I would have been fired. Right. They wouldn't have whitewashed, they would have fired me.
Each one of the statements made in Tim Brennan's affidavit that were incorrect were not made accidentally. They were made intentionally. And the reason that they were made intentionally was to alter the meaning of the search warrant.
On January 20th, 2001, the same day he left office, President Bill Clinton commuted the sentence of a convicted drug trafficker named Carlos Viñali, who was serving 14 years for converting 800 pounds of cocaine into crack as a part of a drug ring that operated between California and Minnesota. A Los Angeles native, Viñali was the son of a wealthy real estate developer named Horatio Viñali, and the family's many business ventures included owning car dealerships in the LA area. Horatio was also a close friend of LA County Sheriff Lee Baca. The Carlos Viñali commutation generated extreme controversy. But even more outraged than the GOP-controlled Congress was the FBI, who vowed to go through all of Viñali's associations with a fine-tooth comb and bust him again once and for all. It was during this investigation that Torres' name came up, as he and Horatio Viñali were such close friends that Horatio reportedly introduced Torres to local politicians, including members of LA City Council, the sheriff, and Planning Commissioner Steve Carmona. Carmona would later become part of the federal indictment on the allegation that Torres bribed him with thousands in gifts in order to secure a liquor license for one of his stores. As the feds continued to dig through Viñali's associations, the Torres probe grew larger and larger, eventually turning into its own investigation, separate from the Viñali probe. That's where LAPD Detective Greg Kading enters our story. Nowadays, he is best known for writing a book that publicly accused Sean Puff Daddy Combs of ordering Tupac Shakur's murder. Back then, Kading was a hungry police investigator on an upward trajectory, and he became obsessed with making the George Torres investigation into the hallmark of his career. Kading worked on prior investigations involving Torres since 1997. He was also a task force agent, giving him broader reach than most LAPD detectives, along with the ability to use federal resources to get what he wanted. With the assistance of the DEA, the FBI, and the ATF, Kading built up sources who were close to Torres. What started to emerge was the picture of a man who had his hands in all sorts of criminal activity, thanks to a network that included large-scale cocaine traffickers, corrupt tax attorneys, and members of subsets of Sureños and Bloods street gangs. But out of everyone in Torres' circle, one person stood out in particular. His name was Ignacio Nacho Mesa. Nacho worked for the Numero Uno Corporation, but he mostly specialized in extracurricular jobs. He operated a car wash called Buckets and a hydraulic shop on property owned by Torres, where one federal informant claimed rapper Be Real of Cypress Hill was seen hanging out. Nacho was also a member of a gang called the Latin Hustlers, and a cocaine trafficker who shipped hundreds of kilos per week, and would ask his mother to lock herself in her room as he and his friends cooked cocaine into crack in her kitchen. According to federal informants, Nacho was Torres' protege, and the two had something of a father and son bond. His most important position in Numero Uno, at least according to the FBI, was Torres' go-to hitman, and he was allegedly willing to kill on command. That was evident after April 24th, 1993, when a Numero Uno security guard named Salvador Puga was gunned down outside the supermarket, supposedly by Manuel Wicked Velasco, a teenaged member of a gang called Primera Flats, who was angry with Torres for shorting him on pay after he'd been hired to sweep up trash in front of the store. Many believed that the actual murderer was another Primera Flats member known as Cricket, and that Velasco was covering up for him because he would be sentenced as a juvenile and receive much less prison time. But in any event, it's obvious that the gang was responsible. Torres' response, according to Kading's informants, was to order Nacho to murder one of the gang's members in retaliation. 1 month after Puga was killed, on May 22, 1993, Nacho allegedly spotted a Primera Flats member named Edward Carpel and opened fire at him with a .45 caliber automatic weapon from a car being driven by another Latin Hustlers member, Fernando Too Short Villapondo. After the murder, Nacho stashed the gun with a Rolling 20s Bloods member named Derek Bodie Smith, another man with ties to Numero Uno who'd play a major role in the racketeering case. Derek Smith was also close with Nacho, as the two were frequently involved in the cocaine industry together. Smith would later be implicated in the 1996 murder of Roderick Chapman, a Bloods member who was in the risky business of robbing drug dealers with both the Bloods and the Crips. In 1996, Chapman reportedly had plans to rob both Nacho and George Torres, but he'd never get the chance. Smith and others lured him to a residence at 802 East 32nd Street, Los Angeles, where he was shot in the head, and his body was dumped at another location. But Smith would never face prosecution. Rather, in the early 2000s, when Smith was serving time for cocaine trafficking, Kading gave him a way out: testify against George Torres. The year after Carpel was killed, another problem arose for Numero Uno, in the form of a Playboys gang member named Jose Shorty Maldonado, who just happened to be close with the Viñali family. Maldonado had been acquainted with George Torres, as the two reportedly went jet skiing and on other excursions together. But in early 1994, Maldonado started poking his head into Numero Uno business, claiming to be part of the Mexican Mafia and demanding regular payments from Torres. While no LA businessman, not even Torres, would want to provoke the powerful Mexican Mafia, Torres didn't immediately buckle. Instead, he allegedly called upon another of his henchmen, Raul Del Real, a close friend and business associate of Nacho, who co-owned the hydraulic shop with him. Del Real, in turn, reached out to Mexican Mafia member Armando Perico Ochoa, who confirmed that Maldonado was acting on his own, not actually as a representative of the prison gang as he claimed. From there, Maldonado's life was forfeit. On February 9, 1994, Maldonado and his pregnant girlfriend exited a barbershop near San Pedro and Jefferson in Los Angeles, which was adjacent to both the original Numero Uno store and Nacho's hydraulic shop. They were struck with dozens of bullets fired from an Uzi, equipped with a silencer. Maldonado was killed, but his girlfriend, Ana Vasquez, survived 16 gunshot wounds to her legs. Nacho was later identified as the shooter. Coincidentally, on the day he was killed, Maldonado was driving a Ford Bronco owned by Carlos Viñali. Those concerns were vindicated in late 1997 when federal authorities in Alabama seized $300,000 of suspected drug money from one of Nacho's couriers. This was further exacerbated a few months later when Derek Smith got busted in Cleveland transporting 25 kilos for the group. They were close to $1.5 million in the hole, with debts to drug dealers in Los Angeles and Birmingham. Nacho started stressing. He started getting desperate, and his moves got increasingly erratic and ill-advised. Under increasing pressure to pay off his debts, Nacho made a series of epically bad decisions of tragic proportions. First, after learning that Raul Del Real was planning to leave town for a few days, he plotted with Derek Smith to break into Raul's home in Whittier and steal tens of thousands of dollars he was sure was hidden inside. Smith recruited members of the All for Crime Bloods, but didn't actually participate in the robbery himself. To pull off the robbery, the group needed to either force or lie their way inside, because, while Raul was out of town, his mother was not. The robbers used a white Astro van belonging to Nacho's brother, Jesus Mesa, loaded it with flowers, and tricked Raul's mother into opening the door by claiming they were florists. Once the door was opened, they pulled guns, tied her up, and ransacked the place looking for money. They were unable to locate the stacks of cash they were expecting, and when Raul heard what happened, he immediately suspected Nacho. Despite his outrage, Raul didn't handle the problem himself. Rather, he consulted with Torres, who told him that he was certain Nacho wouldn't do something like that. But that goodwill was about to evaporate. Nacho made possibly the worst decision of his life. He burglarized the Numero Uno on Jefferson Street, stealing an estimated $600,000 to $700,000 from a safe. And entering with a key that Torres had given him years before, on the assumption that Torres would have forgotten Nacho held onto it. Since the Viñali pardon of 2001, Detective Greg Kading had racked up a list of informants within Torres' inner circle, which included Nacho's brother Jesus, Raul, Derek Smith, and a host of undocumented immigrants who formerly worked at Numero Uno, and who were willing to testify that they were illegally underpaid and that Torres had tried to hide their immigration status from the government. With Torres in jail and his reach on the outside somewhat limited, the feds appeared poised to close the book on Numero Uno once and for all. Torres' trial was set for early 2009, and though his attorneys continued to adamantly proclaim his innocence, RICO charges are a near impossible hurdle to overcome. Torres' March 2009 trial went about how federal authorities expected. Derek Smith and Raul Del Real were star witnesses, and though the defense did everything they could to attack their credibility, it wasn't quite enough. The small good news for Torres was that, in the end, jurors acquitted him of the plot to murder Nacho. But Torres was convicted of murdering Jose Maldonado, and 55 other counts ranging from conspiracy to tax fraud. All that was left was for a judge to formally sentence him to life, and for the feds to sink their teeth into the $109 million prize money. But one very unexpected thing had happened at the trial. Attorneys played a recorded phone call between Kading and Smith at Victorville Prison, where the detective had uttered the phrase, quote, "We've already talked before about big money." Only, there was nothing in the discovery provided to the defense about Kading and Smith ever broaching that subject. And it sounded a hell of a lot like Kading had offered Smith some form of monetary payment to testify. That's when the floodgates opened. Suddenly, federal prosecutors found a trove of calls and reports that, as Judge Gregory Van Tatenhove would later rule, gave the impression Kading was, quote, making promises to the witnesses and, on occasion, making threats to other witnesses. Judge Tatenhove agreed and ordered a Bureau of Prisons official to check for any and all calls between Derek Smith and Kading when Smith was incarcerated at USP Victorville. The judge set a day for the BOP official to testify on his findings, but he'd never get a chance. Before the hearing, the U.S. Attorney's Office stepped in and dismissed all of the RICO charges against Torres.
A judge has tossed out racketeering convictions against the founder of a Southern California grocery store chain. George Torres, founder of Numero Uno stores, was released from jail after federal prosecutors discovered a jailhouse recording that may clear him of charges that he ordered a rival killed. He was released on $1 million bond after the judge threw out racketeering and conspiracy convictions.
In light of their decision, Tatenhove issued a 147-page order where he absolutely ripped into the prosecution and Kading and ordered a new trial on all counts. He wrote, quote, "The court is disturbed by the government's conduct in this case, especially with regard to how the agents handled the key witnesses on the murder predicates." And with that, George Torres became one of the only people to ever first lose a RICO case, then snatch victory from the jaws of defeat when all hope for acquittal seemed lost. He was released from jail, and after some negotiating, agreed to plead guilty to a single count of tax fraud. He was sentenced to time already served, and he went back to the life he'd enjoyed before the feds pulled him over on that June morning in 2007.
It wasn't, "Are you from the South?" Tupac said nothing like that. That makes it personal, it makes it argumentative, and it makes it actionable.
They can't use you anymore because you've already lied on the record, and therefore you have no credibility anymore, so therefore they can't use you.
It began before dawn. The crime sweep involved 300 officers, 10 agencies, including the FBI, at more than 37 locations in the Compton, Linwood, and Long Beach areas.
Of course, during the affidavit, I chased him into a house and we recovered some guns out of that house.
Looking all over Compton for Orlando Anderson, but who finds him? Tim Brennan. So they haul Orlando Anderson in. Vegas police ask him a bunch of questions. And what do the Vegas police do? They walk away.
I just don't see the interest. And I've heard Manning before say that, well, we treat it like every other case, and he doesn't get any special treatment because he is a celebrity, but, you know, I don't know if I buy all that.
There was an arrest made for the murder of Tupac Shakur. It was done by Tim Brennan to Orlando Anderson.
You know, I know the people they need to talk to solve the bullshit that everybody said that we didn't do anything. That's so out in left field, they're ridiculous. You know, and that's that. I had some problems between Las Vegas and me because they don't, you know, like what I've said. Right. But, you know, I speak the truth.
In the Tim Brennan search warrant, there's mention of several gang members involved, and one of those gang members involved is a gang member by the name of Danny Patton, who also goes by the nickname of White Boy. During the service and the execution of this search warrant, many houses and residences that were involved with these gang members were searched, with the notable exception of one, and that was Danny Patton, aka White Boy. It reminds me of the old statement, don't ask a question you don't already know the answer to.
There are a lot of things that no one else knows about.
The Vegas Police Department knew exactly what was going on. It stunk to high heaven and they didn't want any part of it. On the way out, Orlando Anderson says to Brent Becker, "Are you going to arrest me?" Brent Becker says, "Arrest you for what?"
Do I think we know who did it? Yeah.
And the further and harder that Compton pushed the matter, the further the Vegas police backed away and the further that they didn't want anything to do with it.